okay. Awesome. I figured it out. This should be better. Nice. Nice. Hi. Hi, welcome to my channel. It's nice to see you guys again. This is finally my first content video for this channel, which I'm so excited about. I'm hoping that I figured out how to use this camera a little bit better compared to my intro. I think the settings are a little bit better now so that the image is a bit more clear, and then hopefully I'll I'll make an effort to actually film during the day so that I can maybe have better daylight and then it'll look even prettier, hopefully. Also, bear with me because this is my bedroom as it is right now. I do want this to be my filming location for these kind of content talk to the camera type videos, but right now it's a little boring. There's not that much going on, but I'm planning to change this up, put stuff on the wall, get better lighting, make it sort of interesting in here. So bear with me for now while it still looks like this. But hopefully that won't matter because what I'm gonna talk about is gonna be far more interesting than the white wall behind me. Let's hope. Which leads me to the first video for this channel. So as a little preface, I took a digital performance class at NYU, I believe maybe a year ago. And in that class I wrote 2 thesis papers on 2 different types of digital performance. One was on robot theater and the other one was on the audience member's role in digital performance in general. And I figured that the paper that I wrote about audience members' role in digital performance kind of sets the tone and sets the stage, fitting, for digital performance in general. I feel like because maybe a lot of you watching aren't theatre students or aren't really that interested in theatre or performance or acting or I don't know. I mean, it's already a pretty small demographic of people that are interested in digital performance, but hopefully that'll grow and grow more with all the technology that's coming out. But I wanted to make my first video or first content video for this channel be kind of a bit more of a foundation or a bit more background and setting kind of the groundwork for understanding different types of digital performance. And I think what better than to understand the audience member's role in digital performance, considering all of us, me, you, anyone, we're all audience members, right? So hopefully that'll be a nice little introduction to this channel. Without further ado, let's get started. Theatre as we know of it today sets up a pretty distinct role for audience members. Now keep in mind, I'm talking primarily about theatre that is proscenium based, that is with a stage at the front and the audience members all sitting behind looking onto the stage. Also in this, it's very sort of westernized type theatre that pertains to the more sort of naturalism, realism, where the fourth wall is there, where characters are pretty much interacting on stage and the audience is merely a voyeur. They're just looking on. That's what I mean when I'm saying sort of traditional theatre, at least Western theatre, theatre that you see on Broadway, let's just say. And in this kind of theatre, it doesn't matter where you're sitting in the theatre. You could be lucky enough to have front row seats, or you could have just had a last minute decision to go see a show one day and you get the very, very back seat at the very top. And it doesn't matter where you're sitting because the interaction you have with the performance is the same. You might be able to see the actors' faces a little better at the front, but you're getting no more interactive or no more personalized experience being in that front seat or being at the very, very back. In traditional storytelling, this division is kind of set up automatically. It's just the way that the medium at hand positions the audience to the story. It's like a book or a film. We have the same interaction with it. We simply watch on from afar. I mean, let's take a very overused cliche of Romeo and Juliet. I mean, no matter how much we want Romeo and Juliet to end up together, that's not our decision to make. We can't force it to happen. We can't make it happen. But, what happens when we can? When we look at the role that digital performance plays in relation to audience members, that sort of distance and that distinct relationship that I just mentioned doesn't really stand up. It's not really there anymore, especially when it comes to interactive performances, let's just say. It kind of completely disappears. Actually, even the word audience, meaning listener, spectator, shouldn't really exist when it comes to immersive digital performance. What should take its place instead is collaborator. because that's exactly what you are as an audience member in immersive digital performance. And I'm going to be talking about some of the different examples and different mediums and performances that are showing this to be true. But before we get to the performances and showing how exactly that happens, it's super important to look at what actually happens when you are an audience member. And the best way to find out more about this is to look at the traditional audience member for traditional theatre, which, air quotes, because I know there is so many different types of theatre from so many different countries, and so traditional theatre is majorly in air quotes, okay? There really is no traditional theatre. It's all based on where you are, what country you're in, what language you speak, a whole bunch of different factors. So don't take that as the overall, this is all encompassing, this applies to everyone in the world, because no. But for the sake of this video, I am going to be talking about that proscenium style theatre where the stage is there, the fourth wall is there, the audience members are watching on, have no interaction, no chance to change the story or change anything or be affected in any other way from the story, besides just being on the other side of that fourth wall. So Daniel Luhrmann has a great quote from one of his papers. He says, "In storytelling, films, and novels, the audience is traditionally an observer, and by necessity, a passive observer, where the author provides space for both the reader's imaginative input, but you cannot change the words." So here you can see he's mentioning this very two-dimensional relationship an audience member has to any given performance or story, where they simply observe but can't change anything about it. There's no choice, there's no chance to intervene, there's no way to affect the performance in any way. Generic audiences of Western theatre, at least, are a very passive phenomena. They don't seem to do much of anything. I mean, true. But what's interesting is that while it looks like on the outside audience members are doing nothing, their internal life is doing everything but that. In fact, a theatregoer's mirror neuron system takes note of action, but does not distinguish between action it performs and action it observes, so that it initiates various kinds of imitation in the theatregoer: psychological, emotional, and physical. So what we're seeing with the science is that actually what happens within an audience member is totally anything but nothing. Their body fires up and it feels as though what's happening on stage is happening to them. The unfortunate reality about this, though, is despite having this deeply rooted connection to what's happening on stage, we can never have an interaction with it beyond simply a voyeur. Our body's telling us one thing, but our position and role as an audience member in this theater space tells us a completely different thing. There's this two-dimensional performative reality where you can only ever experience something from this empathetic realm. But empathy only takes us so far. I mean, we might see a character, I don't know, lose their job, right? And we feel sorry for them, but that's it. We go home and we continue on with our lives, and there's really no investment. And because of that, we only ever have this relationship with that character that's empathetic. That's it. But theater audiences act because their body's invested, their mind's invested, and their emotions are right there at the cusp between reality and fiction. In other words, audience members want to collaborate. Cinema directs my attention. Novels restrict the reach of my perception. Theatre's pretension to realize everything for me only masks its refusal to let me move, so that I'm always apart, secure in my distance, and confident of my sense of me and my world. And this comfort is empathy. And while empathy is a hugely important part of human life, I'm not trying to shit on empathy. It's comfortable in that we remain safe in our world and just leave that world of that characters and that story to them. That's it. But how are we ever gonna truly understand the pain that, let's go back to the cliche, Romeo felt in witnessing the love of his life die before his eyes and then take the poison thinking that she's dead only to see that she's actually alive? How are we ever gonna truly understand that if we're constantly just watching on from this comfortable side? How does our perception of the story and the characters change when it's up to us to make that decision? When we're Romeo and we choose to take the poison only to see that that has ultimately messed up everything. And this is exactly where digital performance allows for that to happen. So the first medium that I'm going to talk about is VR. So the biggest thing that VR has introduced for digital performance is the way that audience members can interact with their environment in a performance. They have a choice in movement. So no longer does an audience have to be restricted to their seat. They can get up and move around and explore the space. In Mandy Rose's piece entitled The Immersive Turn, the Hype and Hope in the Emergence of Virtual Reality as a Nonfiction Platform, she explains how VR is allowing audience members to interact and choose the way that they interact with any given performance, given that they're able to with VR. She mentions that we're now seeing works which engage the audience in forms of online interaction, in the co-creation of content, and a shift towards the use of documentary media as a platform for convening dialogue rather than for representation alone. And she specifically talks about one particular VR piece called Clouds over Sidra. This was a UN virtual reality piece depicting a 12-year-old girl named Sidra and her life as a Syrian refugee in the Zatari refugee camp. Chris Milk, the creator of this piece, is quoted saying, "When you're sitting there in Sidra's room watching her, you're not watching it through a television screen, you're not watching it through a window, you're sitting right there with her. When you look down, you're sitting on the same ground as she is on. Because of that, you feel her humanity in a deeper way. You empathize with her in a deeper way. VR is a machine, but through this machine, we become more compassionate, we become more empathetic, we become more connected, and ultimately, we become more human." I highly, highly recommend you guys to check out this VR piece as well because it's incredible. I'll put the link to it down below, so check that out. And as a note, I believe you don't need to have an actual VR headset, although it would work obviously if you do, but you can still use your phone, I think, and use that as like your lens to look through this performance and use that to look around 360 degrees. So in this VR piece, you're transported right there to the refugee camp. And every choice that you make in terms of where you look brings you closer and closer into Sidra's world. I mean, you're there just as much as she is. And in having this choice of movement, in choosing where you're looking around and what you're looking at, it suddenly brings you right there to that piece. You have such a stronger connection to it and the world that she lives in and her story. You've transcended that safety net of being an audience member that's distant because now you're right there. You're choosing where you're looking around. This is just as much your reality as it is hers. Rose also mentions that users experiencing the stories in either VR format were more likely to recall the stories, be motivated to find out more about the subject, and to take political or social action after viewing. Which is to say that this new shift in perspective hugely impacts the way that people interact with any given performance. So VR demonstrates a way that audience members now have a choice in the way that they move and look around and explore the performative space. But video games take it one step further than that. Essentially with video games, you are the performance in that the story wouldn't exist if you weren't there to progress it. So it would be really hard to talk about immersive storytelling, character-driven gaming experiences and not talk about Quantic Dream. If you guys don't know Quantic Dream from that name, you probably have heard of some of their games. They've made games such as Fahrenheit and Beyond Two Souls and Heavy Rain and Detroit Become Human. Their games are insane. They're so beautiful. The stories are incredible. And the way that players and audiences, I mean, let's face it, they're pretty much audience members just as much as they are players. Their interaction and their investment in the story is incredible. It's like no other games. So David Cage, the founder, the game designer, writer, and director of Quantic Dream, he did a TED Talk called How Video Games Turn Players into Storytellers. And I think that there's a really interesting quote, so I'm gonna just play that right now.
I think in the end, the experience is very unique because it is the result of the collaboration between a writer creating this narrative landscape and a player making his own decisions, telling his own story, and becoming the co-writer, but also the co-actor and the co-director of the story. Interactive storytelling is a revolution in the way we tell stories. With the emergence of new platforms like interactive television, virtual reality, and video games, it can become a new form of entertainment and maybe even a new form of art.
Okay, so in traditional theatre, that idea would be absolutely ludicrous. Can you imagine an audience member that's also a co-actor, a co-writer, and a co-director all at the same time as it's happening in real time? I mean, imagine a playwright that's written a whole script with multiple storylines and characters and endings, and then just lets the audience member pick the way that it goes as it's happening in real time. I mean, it would be an absolute chaotic mess. And yet, just thinking about a performance like that, it sounds dope. I mean, I'd want to see that. It sounds insane. Well, you can get that with video games. I mean, the possibilities are endless because it hasn't been written yet. The story hasn't been told. No one knows the outcomes because the audience haven't made their choices. So I'm going to be looking at Heavy Rain specifically. So if you haven't played or heard or seen playthroughs of Heavy Rain, basically it follows 4 characters and their search for the serial murderer named the Origami Killer. One of these 4 characters is a single father whose son has been kidnapped by the Origami Killer. And you as the player, you make all of the choices in the game, knowing obviously that some of the choices lead to differing outcomes and endings and potentially the death of your character that you're playing as. And in having the responsibility of all of the choices, it tests your skills not only as a gamer, but in a very real sense as a person. Luhrmann has some great quotes. I've used so many. He also mentions that if one considers our enhanced emotional engagement with a character in interactive theatre, the human experience of living with repercussions is no less central to the art of engagement characterizing Heavy Rain. I mean, the fact that your involvement in this performance now has real repercussions, it means that there's no way that you can consider yourself just a mere audience member. You're in every way now a collaborator working alongside the director and the writer and the actors. I mean, they've created this environment and now it's up to you to do what you will with it. It's like they've set the parameters, they've set the groundwork, but now it's all you. It's your story now. And just like any performance or story doesn't start with the most climactic moment in the plot, although film is a different thing, because usually that can happen. And then they play everything in reverse and you see how it got to that point. But with theatre specifically, that's not the case. And neither is it with Heavy Rain, for example. There's a build and a progression, just like any other theatre performance. And this is usually characterized by doing mundane sort of everyday tasks that the character, has to live through, and you subsequently have to make the choices for these everyday mundane things. Things like going to the bathroom, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, and working on blueprints. However, Cage seeks to turn the mundane into something more, an entry point for understanding and sympathizing with the character. These simple tasks slowly eases you into the world and slowly eases you into your role as a collaborator. And you're slowly starting to understand what that means and your role and responsibility now in this piece. But you realize that it's not just distanced empathy, because now it's all on you to make the right choices. And if you don't, there's consequences. Oh, you bet there's consequences. You're not simply observing it happening. I mean, that's a film. It's a game, it's interactive, it's up to you to make the story happen. And because of this, you understand that your choices have great weight. I mean, all there is your choices. So, the weight of deciding what to make your son for dinner, a son who is still grieving over his brother's death 2 years later, can seem as important as an FBI agent's decision on where to pursue clues that will lead him to the Origami Killer. And because of all of this, you understand what it means to be exactly in these characters' shoes. You understand that what you personally choose dictates this other person's life. Cage has always mentioned that he likes his games to be played through once, so as to emulate real life, given that we only have one. He wants us to understand that whatever choices made, whether right or wrong, have consequences, and that these consequences can't be replayed or undone. So if you accidentally make that wrong choice and have your main character die, that's now on you. That reality now lies in your hands and on your conscience. Heavy. This full-bodied investment into the character's story and life now shifts the way that you perceive this whole story. And in doing so, you also realize just how close any given reality is at any point. Even if it's not in that fictional character's life, in our life at least, it makes you sort of realize that. I mean, in this world where we kind of struggle to understand and really relate to other people's stories beyond just this mere distanced empathy, art with responsibility and choice not only seems important, it seems crucial now more than ever. And for the longest time, theatre has created this sort of pre-planned, pre-rehearsed, pre-written idea of life and reality and presented that as a way to have you reflect and have you understand new ways of thinking about life. And it's done that, and it continues to do that, no doubt about it. But you are still at this distance. You are still watching this story from a distanced empathy. And this doesn't get to the very root of what it means to be physically, emotionally, and psychologically a part of that story and experience what that character and what that person is exactly going through. Our human nature instinctively wants to intervene, it wants to be a part of it, but our role as that audience member sort of stops us. But with these new mediums and means for immersive digital performance, that all changes. VR gives us the choice of movement, and video games gives us the choice of story and character and outcomes. So this passive audience member doesn't exist. Instead, what it's replaced with is collaborator. And in being a collaborator, you understand that any reality is possible to happen at any given moment, because now you're the one choosing it and dictating the outcome. And we can understand the story and the characters to their fullest potential now, because we're living this story. Emotion, movement, choice, and all. Daniel Luhrmann had a bunch of quotes in my paper, but to sort of sum up and sort of put a little cap on everything that I mentioned, he's got another great quote. It just kind of summarizes beautifully the new role that this digital performance creates in relation to audience member turned collaborator and what that means for the future of performing arts. This would not be a case of the artists being replaced, but one of sharing his or her creation, enhancing it, recognizing that a work, whether a straight play or a video game, is a transaction among artist, actor, audience, and that those roles need not remain distinct. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I wrote. It just kind of scratches the surface on the bigger picture that is digital performance in general, but I feel like this was a nice sort of introduction to what I'm going to be talking about more on this channel and different digital performances that I'm going to look at in the future, and just kind of give a better understanding of audience members' roles in traditional theatre versus digital performances. And hopefully you learned a little something. Just as a little bit of extra information, I actually presented this paper as a game. And basically I figured, well, what a better way to present my paper than to actually make it into a game. And so the people that are reading the paper are experiencing in real time the stuff that I'm actually talking about in the paper. I am in absolutely no way a game designer or a software engineer, or even, I don't even know the first thing about coding besides when I was 15 and I had a Tumblr page and I had to edit the HTML so I could add a music player in the top left corner. I thought that I was such a genius because I had to edit my HTML. Yeah, so that's about the extent of it. So basically the premise of the game was that there's this girl and she wrote this paper, my paper, and she finds this website that helps to boost your grade. So you can upload your paper that's like a C+ paper and it'll make it an A+ paper. So basically she uploads a paper, and what happens is this website sort of holds her paper hostage because it's like, oh, you're trying to cheat your way to an A? That's not gonna happen. We're gonna teach you a lesson. And so you play as her like friend, roommate type person, and you're right there trying to help her get her essay back. And you have to answer questions correctly and it'll give you back the essay paragraph by paragraph. But as you're reading it, as the person reading the essay, you're also reading the paper as it goes. And as you answer questions correctly, you get more and more of the paper. But obviously some answers are wrong and it leads you to dead ends and then you have to restart all over again. So there's the whole aspect of responsibility and consequence. So the best way that sort of enhanced my paper and the points I was making was to actually have the person reading the paper experience it themselves and experience the points that I was making. It's interesting just to think of the possibilities of the ways and different ways that you can actually make and write papers and present them. Because maybe you're gonna write something and then you think, damn, if I could present it like this, it would make my point so much better. Or if I could, complement my paper with this and have the person do this first and then read the paper, it will help. Or literally anything. There's so many possibilities, and hopefully, in the future, more and more sort of creative ways of writing will come forward. Because I think why not? So that was pretty much the basis of what I was writing in this paper, and hopefully it was a nice, informative little video. I hope you learned something, took something away from it. I mean, it would be amazing if this actually interested you in digital performance in general. I mean, I hope that my channel will be able to do that, and if it did, that's amazing. And I'm gonna link everything that I referenced in this video, all of the performances, all of the papers that I quoted, all of that stuff, I'm gonna link it below. So yeah, thanks for watching my very first video on this channel. Content video. My first video was a very interesting intro video, which if you didn't see, maybe check it out to find a little bit more about me, but it's fine. You can just stick with these videos. That'll be fine. If you did like this video, please like it. If you're interested in these kind of videos and in what I'm gonna be making next, please subscribe. I'm a very new channel, as you can tell by wherever the number for my subscribers is, you can tell. Very new. So any support, any appreciation and love and all of that is super appreciated, honestly. Like, I love each and every one of you that's watched this video and has subscribed to my channel and liked it and all of that stuff. You guys are amazing. I'm so excited to keep making more videos and to share more of my love and passion for all of this stuff. And I hope that you guys are excited to watch more videos to come too. Like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you guys would want videos about. If there's anything in particular that you think would be interesting to hear about or that you'd like for me to talk about. I'm definitely gonna do my other paper, the robot theater paper that I wrote. I'm definitely gonna make a video about that soon. There's some crazy stuff with that, so look forward to that. And I'm gonna get started on working on my next video, you guys. So thank you so much for watching this, and I'll see you guys next time. All right, bye.